The soft morning light filtered through the sheer curtains of Amelia's bedroom, painting her face in hues of gold and warmth. She stirred gently, her hands instinctively resting on her swollen belly, where two tiny heartbeats danced within her. For months, she had lived in a world wrapped in quiet dreams, filled with hope, laughter, and the sweet promise of a family she thought would last forever. Her husband, Ethan, had once been the center of her world, the man who swore under the stars that he would love her more than his own life. They had built their story brick by brick, starting from college days where their friendship blossomed into a love story envied by everyone around them. Amelia, a writer with a gentle soul, had always been drawn to Ethan's determination, his unwavering charm, and the way he could make her laugh even on her worst days. Every morning began with his texts. Every evening ended with his arms around her shoulders, whispering dreams of their future children. When the pregnancy test turned positive, she cried tears of joy into his chest, and he had kissed her forehead, promising he'd never let her face the world alone. But the promises that once sounded eternal began to fade into silence. Ethan's late-night calls became frequent, his distant stares lasted longer, and his smile once effortless now seemed forced. Amelia tried to convince herself it was work stress, a temporary storm. Yet deep down, a whisper grew louder in her heart, warning her that something sacred was quietly dying between them. Still, she clung to hope. She painted the nursery walls pale blue and soft cream, filled it with tiny clothes and plush toys, and every night she read stories aloud to her unborn twins, imagining Ethan by her side. But his absence grew. Each night she waited, her heart pacing against the clock, praying for the sound of his footsteps. And each night, silence answered. Then one evening, that silence shattered. Amelia had been preparing dinner, a simple dish Ethan loved, pasta with basil and lemon zest, when her phone buzzed. The message came from an unknown number, but what she saw nearly made her drop the knife in her trembling hands. It was a picture Ethan, sitting across from a woman she had never seen before, his hand tenderly holding hers, both of them smiling as if they belonged in another world. Amelia's knees went weak. The world blurred as her mind screamed for reasons that didn't exist. She could barely breathe as she dialed his number, but he didn't answer. Hours later, he came home, his shirt smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't hers, and when she confronted him, his eyes betrayed no guilt, no shame, just cold indifference. "Amelia," he said, voice low but steady, "you're overthinking. She's just a friend." His tone was the final insult, the cruelest blade. For the first time, she saw the stranger behind the man she loved. In that moment, something inside her began to break, not just her trust, but the part of her that believed love was unshakable. She didn't scream, didn't cry. She simply walked away, holding her stomach, whispering to her unborn twins that she would protect them no matter what. That night, while Ethan slept in the guest room, she sat in the nursery, the soft glow of the nightlight washing over her face, tears falling silently onto the little clothes she had folded with love. Her heart broke not only for herself, but for the innocent lives growing inside her, who would one day ask why their father had turned his back before they were even born. But Amelia didn't yet know that this betrayal was only the beginning, that the man she loved was about to make a choice that would cut deeper than anything she could imagine. A few weeks later, as the days crawled by and her due date approached, Amelia tried to find peace in small things, sunlight on her skin, the sound of birds in the garden, the rhythm of the twins' kicks. Ethan, meanwhile, had become almost a ghost in their home, speaking only when necessary, always glued to his phone, his lips curling into secret smiles she never shared. One afternoon, she found a message on his unlocked screen that changed everything. "I can't wait to see our baby, Ethan. He'll have your eyes," it read, followed by a heart emoji and the name Sabrina. Amelia's world spun. "Our baby?" she whispered, rereading the words, her breath catching in her throat. Sabrina, the same woman from the photo. He had gotten her pregnant too. Her hands shook so violently that the phone nearly slipped. The twins kicked inside her as if sensing her pain. That evening, when Ethan returned home, she confronted him, tears streaming down her face, voice cracking under the weight of betrayal. "Tell me it's not true, Ethan. Tell me she's not carrying your child." But he didn't deny it. Instead, he looked at her with the same calm cruelty he had shown before and said, "Amelia, things happen. You and I were already falling apart. Sabrina's baby. It just happened." The words pierced her like shards of glass. For a moment, she couldn't move or speak. Then she laughed bitterly, the kind of laugh that sounds more like pain than joy. "So what happens to us? To our babies?" she asked, her voice trembling. He sighed and looked away, as if her question bored him. "We'll figure it out," he muttered, walking past her, leaving her standing there, broken but burning inside. That night, Amelia made a silent vow. She would bring her twins into this world with or without his love. But she also swore something darker, that one day, Ethan would know what it felt like to lose everything he took for granted, everything he discarded as if it were nothing. She didn't know how yet, but she knew her revenge would not come in anger or screams. It would come in silence, in success, in a way that would make him wish he had never betrayed her. The day Amelia gave birth, the world outside was calm, as if unaware of the storm that raged inside her. Rain tapped softly against the hospital window, each drop echoing her heartbeat as she lay on the bed, exhausted but holding two tiny lives close to her chest. The twins Noah and Grace were perfect. Their cries were soft yet strong, filling the sterile room with a kind of hope she hadn't felt in months. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she whispered their names, memorizing their faces, their warmth, their scent. For a fleeting moment, the pain, the betrayal, all of it faded. She imagined Ethan walking in with flowers, holding her hand, smiling proudly at their children. But the door opened to emptiness. No one came. Hours passed and still he didn't show. Finally, as evening shadows crept into the room, she picked up her phone and called him. Her voice trembled, yet she tried to stay calm. "Ethan, the twins are here." There was silence on the other end, then a cold, distant reply. "I can't make it today. Sabrina's in labor, too." The words hit her harder than any physical pain. Her breath caught. Her hands tightened around the twins, and for a second, she thought she might faint. He had chosen to be by Sabrina's side instead of hers. Her tears fell freely now, each one a drop of disbelief. The nurse entered, smiling warmly, oblivious to the heartbreak in the room. "You have beautiful babies," she said softly. Amelia managed a weak smile, nodding as she wiped her face. That night, while her twins slept beside her, Amelia realized the truth in full. Ethan had made his choice. He had chosen Sabrina. He had chosen her child. But Amelia also realized something else. He would never have her strength, her courage, or her love. He might have left her, but he had not broken her. Not yet. The days after returning home were both beautiful and brutal. The house felt emptier than ever, yet every cry, every giggle from her babies filled the silence with life. She spent sleepless nights feeding, rocking, and soothing them, her heart both aching and healing with every touch. Ethan visited once, just once, holding a box of diapers and wearing the guiltless expression of a man who had already moved on. He stood near the door, his eyes glancing briefly at the twins before saying, "They're cute. I'll send some money." Amelia looked at him, her face calm, but her voice sharp enough to cut. "Keep your money, Ethan. They don't need it." "They don't need you." For a second, she saw a flicker of discomfort in his eyes, but it vanished quickly as he shrugged and left. After that day, she never saw him again. Months passed, and Amelia poured herself into raising her twins while rebuilding her life piece by piece. She began writing again short stories about love, loss, and resilience. One of her pieces went viral, then another. Before long, she was invited to speak at conferences, to publish her first book. Her words born from pain became her power. She used them to heal herself and to help others heal too. She found support in an unexpected place, her friend Clara, who babysat the twins so Amelia could write, and her neighbor Mrs. Jenkins, who dropped by with home-cooked meals and gentle wisdom. Slowly, the laughter returned to her home. Yet, beneath the strength she showed the world, a part of her still remembered the night she held her newborns alone, while their father held another woman's hand. That memory burned quietly in the corners of her heart, fueling her resolve not just to survive but to rise above in ways Ethan could never imagine. 2 years passed, and Amelia had transformed. Her once fragile frame now carried a quiet confidence. Her eyes, once filled with tears, now held fire. Her first book, The Weight of Broken Promises, became a national bestseller, touching hearts across the country. Interviews, talk shows, and magazine features followed. She was no longer the abandoned wife who had been left to pick up the pieces. She was a voice for every woman who had been broken and rebuilt herself. One morning, she was invited to a charity gala as the keynote speaker. As she stood backstage, adjusting her dress, her mind drifted to her twins waiting at home, their giggles echoing in her heart. The host announced her name, and she stepped onto the stage to thunderous applause. But as she reached the podium, her eyes froze. Sitting in the front row, beside Sabrina, the same woman who had destroyed her marriage, was Ethan. His hair was thinner, his smile forced, but his arrogance was unchanged. Their eyes met and time seemed to stop. For a brief moment, memories flashed, the laughter, the lies, the nights she cried herself to sleep. But instead of pain, Amelia felt something entirely new. Power. She smiled faintly, then began her speech. Every word she spoke carried the weight of her journey, and as the audience listened in silence, Ethan's confident posture faltered. She talked about betrayal, about finding light in the darkest places, about how love doesn't always come from others but from within. When she finished, the crowd stood in applause and Ethan's face was pale. Sabrina clapped nervously beside him, unaware of the storm brewing behind his eyes. That night, Amelia realized that her revenge didn't need to come in anger or chaos. It was already unfolding in her success, her peace, her strength. She didn't need to destroy him. Watching her shine while he faded into regret would be punishment enough. As the weeks passed after that unforgettable gala, the image of Ethan sitting in the front row lingered in Amelia's mind, not because she still loved him, but because of how small he looked now in the shadow of the woman he had once abandoned. She didn't reach out to him, didn't call or message. Instead, she focused on her twins, who were growing fast, Noah with his curious eyes, and Grace with her mischievous laughter. Every morning, their tiny feet pattered through the house, their giggles filling the once hollow rooms with warmth. They were her world, her purpose, the living proof that even from pain, beauty could be born. One afternoon, while she was working on her second book, her phone rang. She hesitated when she saw the name flash across the screen: Ethan. After 2 years of silence, his call felt like a ghost from another life. She let it ring twice before answering, her voice calm but distant. "Amelia," he began, his tone hesitant, almost pleading. I saw you at the gala. You were amazing. I'm proud of you." The words felt hollow, like they came from someone who barely knew her. She didn't respond, and the silence stretched. "Amelia," he continued, "things haven't been easy. Sabrina, she left, took the baby and moved to another city. I don't even get to see him." For a moment, Amelia's breath caught not out of sympathy, but at the cruel twist of fate. The man who had chosen another woman's child over his own now stood empty-handed. She closed her eyes, steadying her voice. "I'm sorry that happened," she said softly, her tone polite but distant. "But we all live with our choices, Ethan, don't we?" There was nothing more to say. She ended the call and stared out the window, the sunlight reflecting off the glass like shards of truth. For years she had dreamed of this moment, of him suffering the way he made her suffer. But now that it had come, she felt no joy, no triumph, only clarity. Her revenge wasn't about watching him fall. It was about rising so high that his betrayal could no longer touch her. Days turned into months, and Amelia's career soared. Her second book, The Woman Who Chose Herself, became an even bigger success than the first. She was invited to speak internationally, and her story inspired countless people who had faced betrayal and loss. Yet amid her growing fame, Amelia remained grounded. She still woke up early to make breakfast for Noah and Grace, still read bedtime stories to them every night, and still thanked the universe for the second chance she had been given. One evening, after a long day of interviews, she sat in her study surrounded by framed photos of her children. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of rain outside. Suddenly there was a knock on the door. She frowned, not expecting visitors. When she opened it, she froze. Ethan stood there, soaked from the rain, his eyes tired and desperate. He looked nothing like the confident man she once knew. His shoulders were hunched, his hair unkempt, his suit worn out. "Amelia," he said, voice trembling, "please, I need to talk." For a moment, she considered closing the door, but something inside her, perhaps the part that still valued closure, made her step aside. He entered, his gaze wandering over the home, the photos, the warmth. "You've done well," he said quietly, almost in disbelief. "You and the kids, you've built a beautiful life." She folded her arms, watching him carefully. "We built it," she corrected, "without you." He looked down, shame flickering in his eyes. "I know I don't deserve anything from you," he said, voice breaking, "but I just wanted to see them once." "My children!" The word "my" made her flinch, but she said nothing. Instead, she led him to the living room where the twins were playing. When they saw the stranger, they looked at him curiously, unaware of who he was. Ethan's lips quivered as he knelt, his eyes welling with tears. "Noah, Grace," he whispered, but the names sounded foreign in his mouth. The children simply stared before returning to their toys, their innocence protecting them from confusion. Amelia watched silently, a storm of emotions swirling inside her body, anger, sadness, and something close to forgiveness, though not quite there. Ethan stood, his voice trembling. "I made a mistake, Amelia. The biggest one of my life. I thought love was about excitement, about something new. But I was wrong. You were my home, and I destroyed it." She listened, her face unreadable, and when he finished, she spoke softly, each word deliberate. "You didn't destroy it, Ethan. You walked away from it. I rebuilt it. Without you." Her tone was calm, but it cut deeper than any scream ever could. After he left, Amelia stood by the window, watching him disappear into the rain. For the first time, she didn't feel anger or bitterness. Instead, she felt something like release. The ghosts of her past had finally left her house, leaving behind only peace. She returned to the living room where the twins were now drawing pictures on the floor. Grace looked up, holding a crayon-streaked paper. "Mommy, look! It's us!" she said proudly. Amelia smiled, kneeling beside her. "It's beautiful," she whispered, pulling both her children into her arms. In that moment, she realized that revenge had never been about making Ethan suffer. It had been about reclaiming her life, her identity, her strength. She kissed the tops of their heads, tears of quiet joy spilling down her cheeks. Later that night, as the twins slept and the rain finally stopped, she opened her journal and began to write. Not about betrayal this time, but about healing, about finding light after darkness. Her words flowed easily, like a confession to her soul. She wrote about how pain doesn't define you, how forgiveness isn't for the one who hurt you, but for the one who needs peace to move on. She closed the journal, smiling softly to herself, knowing that this was the real ending, the moment where her story stopped being about him and started being about her. Her revenge was complete, not because she destroyed him, but because she became everything he thought she couldn't be. Months later, Amelia's life had settled into a rhythm that was peaceful and full of meaning. Her mornings began with the laughter of Noah and Grace as they clumsily tried to pour their own cereal, and her evenings ended with their tiny arms wrapped around her neck as they fell asleep to the sound of her voice, reading their favorite bedtime stories. The air in her home was no longer heavy with memories of betrayal. Instead, it carried warmth, security, and love. Every corner of the house reflected her growth, a bookshelf filled with her published works, framed photos of her smiling with her twins, and sunlight streaming through the windows like an affirmation that life could begin again after heartbreak. But life has a way of testing peace, even when you think you've healed. One afternoon, Amelia received an unexpected invitation. It was from a major publishing company an offer to adapt her books into a television series. The excitement was overwhelming, but when she read the attached email, her heart skipped a beat. The name at the bottom of the message was one she hadn't seen in years: Ethan Reynolds. He had apparently joined the same media company as a producer after his previous business had collapsed. For a moment, Amelia just stared at the screen, her fingers frozen. Of all the people in the world, it had to be him. She could almost laugh at the irony. The man who once dismissed her dreams now wanted to collaborate on them. After a long breath, she composed herself. She wasn't the same woman who had cried on the hospital bed begging for his attention. She was in control now. So instead of rejecting the offer outright, she replied with professionalism and calm, "Thank you for the opportunity. I'd be happy to discuss this further." The next morning, she received a quick response confirming the meeting. And just like that, the past was knocking again, but this time, Amelia was ready to answer. The day of the meeting arrived, and Amelia, dressed with deliberate poesia-fitted navy dress, soft curls framing her face, a hint of confidence in every step she took. When she entered the sleek glass building, heads turned. She wasn't just another writer. She was a woman who had turned her pain into purpose. When she stepped into the conference room, she found Ethan already there. He looked up, startled, clearly unprepared for how composed she was. Time had not been kind to him. His face carried lines of stress, his posture slightly slumped, his once sharp confidence dulled. He stood awkwardly and extended his hand. "Amelia," he said softly, "you look incredible." She gave a polite smile, shaking his hand briefly before taking her seat. "Let's get started, shall we?" Her tone was professional, neutral, leaving no room for personal conversation. The meeting began, and Amelia discussed creative directions, adaptation rights, and the emotional tone of her work. Ethan listened, occasionally nodding, clearly amazed by how far she had come. There was admiration in his eyes, but also regret, a silent realization of what he had thrown away. When the discussion ended, the company's executives left the room, leaving the two of them alone. The silence that followed was heavy but not uncomfortable. Ethan finally spoke, his voice low. "You've built something amazing, Amelia. I always knew you were special. I just didn't realize it soon enough." She met his gaze, calm and unwavering. "You didn't realize it because you weren't looking," she said, her voice steady. He looked down, guilt clouding his face. "I wish I could take it back," he murmured. "All of it. The way I treated you, the choices I made." Amelia leaned back slightly, her expression thoughtful. "You can't rewrite the past, Ethan. You can only live with it." For the first time, he looked genuinely broken. "Do you ever think you could forgive me?" he asked quietly. Amelia paused for a long moment, her eyes soft but distant. "I already did," she said. "Not for you, for me. I forgave you the day I stopped needing you to suffer." Ethan blinked, tears welling in his eyes. But she stood gracefully, gathering her notes. "Good luck with the project," she added, her tone polite but final. And with that, she walked out of the room, her heels clicking confidently against the floor, leaving Ethan behind to face the echo of his own regret. Later that night, Amelia sat on her balcony, sipping tea as the city lights shimmered in the distance. The twins were asleep, and the quiet felt different now, peaceful, not lonely. Her phone buzzed with a message from the publisher confirming that the adaptation deal had gone through successfully. She smiled to herself, feeling both gratitude and closure. She had faced the man who broke her without anger, without tears, and walked away stronger than ever. The next morning, she decided to take her children to the countryside for a few days. They drove through winding roads surrounded by golden fields, laughter filling the car as Noah and Grace pointed at cows and birds along the way. When they reached a quiet cabin overlooking a lake, Amelia felt a calm she hadn't known in years. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, she sat by the water with her twins, their small hands wrapped around hers. Grace looked up and asked innocently, "Mommy, where's Daddy?" Amelia hesitated for a second, her heart tightening, then smiled gently. "Daddy's living his own story, sweetheart. But we have ours, and it's a beautiful one." Noah nodded, resting his head on her shoulder, and in that moment, Amelia realized how far she had come, not just from heartbreak, but from the woman she used to be. She had learned that revenge was never about destroying someone else's life. It was about reclaiming your own. The stars began to appear one by one, their reflections shimmering on the lake, and Amelia whispered softly to herself, "I won." Not in anger or bitterness, but in peace. Her children were safe, her dreams were alive, and her heart once shattered was whole again. And somewhere out there, Ethan was finally learning what true loss felt like. Not the loss of love, but the loss of the woman who had once given him everything. When I finally stood before him again, months had passed, and time had stripped every illusion away. The woman he had chosen over me was gone, taking his money and his peace with her. His business had crumbled. The house that once echoed with arrogance now stood empty, filled only with the ghosts of his own choices. I didn't come back to gloat, nor to see him suffer. I came because closure has a sound, and it's the silence that follows truth. He looked smaller, defeated, clutching a photo of us like it was a map back to something he could never return to. He tried to speak, words stumbling from his mouth like broken glass, but I raised my hand, stopping him. "You don't owe me an apology," I said softly, "because your betrayal taught me everything I needed to know about love, power, and peace." I told him how I rebuilt my life, how pain became the soil where I planted new dreams. I had opened a small studio, teaching young women how to stand again after being broken, how to rebuild their confidence and create their own path. My success didn't come from revenge. It came from refusing to let his betrayal define my worth. I could see in his eyes the moment he realized that the woman he'd destroyed had become the woman he could never reach again. He whispered my name, almost pleading, but I smiled not in cruelty, but in strength, and turned to leave. As I walked away, the air felt lighter, like the world had finally exhaled. The chapter was closed, and for the first time, I didn't need him to see my value. I already did. Life moves differently when you choose peace over pain. I often look back and realize that losing him was never a loss. It was freedom disguised as heartbreak. So, if you're watching this and you've ever been betrayed, remember sometimes, walking away is the loudest revenge. Don't chase those who broke you. Rebuild yourself so beautifully that they can never reach your level again. Because at the end of every heartbreak is a beginning that's yours alone to write. If you felt this story, subscribe and share it. Your support helps more stories like this reach the world.